All right, what's going on, everybody? Tannen again here with just a video on the specific prompt that you guys are dealing with for essay number 2, which is, hello, do you think technology actually can harm our ability to learn and remember? Why or why not? Right, so this is the question that you guys got, and this was on the little prompt as well, but Professor Stollinger notes that while you can stick to a simple yes or no answer, you can also answer this question with more nuance, right? Yes, however, or in some ways yes, in some ways no. Your stance just needs to be clear. So if you're saying yes, it harms our ability, however, right, you don't want to say, oh, however, it can also have some downfalls. You want to explain those downfalls. If you say in some ways yes, in some ways no, in what ways yes, in what ways no, you need to be specific, right? Um, so in terms of crafting a thesis for this prompt, I have done a video on how to write a good thesis. Check it out. It's in my tab on Blackboard if you haven't watched it yet. But that one's a little more general, right? Whereas this one is going over this prompt in particular. There's that. And then I always, no matter what though, for any paper, right, always read the readings before I even think about writing the thesis, right? Because I need to know what we're talking about and how the authors are approaching this topic. So in this case, I did find that the readings offer quotes for both a yes or no answer. Like I could go either side. Sometimes readings, it will be really hard to argue one side, right? Maybe the readings are just really biased towards, technology sucks or technology is obviously hurting our ability to learn and to remember. And so it would be super hard to argue that no, it doesn't, right? Because the readings just don't have any quotes that you could use. In this case, however, there was quotes for both of them. So I just decided to pick the side that yes, technology hinders our ability to learn because it was kind of either way. So now that I know my initial claim, right, that technology does hinder our ability to learn, I go through my readings again. And now I go through, and now that I know my stance, I can look specifically for quotes that support that idea. So I go through, the first one is the one from Nicholas Carr, or I mean, you can go through either one, right? But I just happen to find this quote towards the beginning of his essay or writing here, and says, "They supply the stuff of thought, but they also shape the process of thought." And I would have to kind of lead into this, right? What's they? He just means like the internet, right? So the internet supplies the stuff of thought, but they also shape the process of thought. And what the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. My mind now expects to take in information the way the net distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles. Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. So I liked this one because it's a pretty good metaphor, right? It's a good way of kind of explaining the difference between just coming across an article online and actually going to the library and getting a book and like reading about it, right? It's just a different way of absorbing information. And so, he hits on the idea that technology only offers glimpses of information rather than the detailed and nuanced information you would get from something like a textbook. And so I can extrapolate this and I can build upon it to relate it back to my initial claim, right? So I take that basis or that quote as the basis for the first part of my thesis. So if we condense what he's saying here, and even my paraphrasing, if we condense that all down, he's basically saying that technology offers easily consumable amounts of information, right? And this, if you understand where I'm going with this could be a problem, right? Because if we're only getting a glimpse of things, if we're only getting the surface level of information, then that might lead to problems like actually learning about things because we're only, again, getting the surface level. We aren't doing the work to like truly understand or comprehend a subject. So that's kind of where my mind is going. But again, this is just the first part of my thesis. So I know that I need to pair this with something from the other reading, right? So then I go back to the other reading, the one from Clive Thompson. And this reading, actually, it wasn't until the very end that I found a quote that deals with this. So he's talking about transactive memory, right? The whole like dynamic between that. And this one in particular, he says, quote, a public library or your notebook or sheaf of papers keeps no intentional secrets about its mechanisms. A search engine keeps many. We need to develop literacy in these tools the way we teach kids how to spell and write. We need to be skeptical about search firms' claims of being impartial referees of information. So that's a quote that I chose from him. Because here he's just discussing this idea that the internet purposely, right, hides and stores information in a much more malicious manner than traditional information sources like libraries or textbooks or encyclopedias. So the internet, right, because of like advertisements and all this other stuff, is, like I said, malicious in its ways that it will keep information from us. Because the internet is a great resource, right? We all know this, but Facebook is a thing, right? And Facebook likes to give us stuff that like is easy to consume and that is in line with our ideologies, right? Rather than the quote unquote objective facts. Whereas a textbook or, book in the library or an encyclopedia, it might have outdated or just like general like misinformation, but it likely is because it's old, right? It's just not up to date. Or maybe the author just didn't do all the research they needed or whatever, right? But more often than not, it's not malicious. It wasn't like they were purposely trying to hide the information with us or from us. They just didn't know. And so that relates back to my ideas that, to my initial claim, that the internet or that technology hinders our ability to learn because, right, if the internet is purposely hiding stuff from us, then we're not always learning the real facts, right? And that is a problem. So I can, again, condense this idea into, to just say that the internet organizes information differently than traditional methods. And then I would elaborate on that in my thing and say by organizing it differently, I mean organizing it maliciously. And I could even say that in my thesis too. I could say the internet is malicious in the way that it organizes information, right? I could reword this a little bit, but I just ended up going with this. So now I need to combine my 2 points, right? I need to combine the first part of my thesis, the second part of it, and in my last video, I talked about how we want to show a relationship between the ideas expressed in our thesis, right? So right now I have my 2 main points, that the internet offers easily consumable amounts of info and that the internet organizes information differently than traditional methods. So how am I going to combine these? In this case, I don't really see how one point leads to another. In my last video, I talked about how like you often can like express the relationship that like, for example, X leads into Y, which leads into Z, right? In this case, I don't really see how the internet or just technology offering easily consumable amounts of information leads it to storing information differently. However, both of these points combined, right, do reinforce my initial claim that the internet can cause us to have trouble learning. So that's the language that I'll use. I will use that word combine, and that will show the relationship between these 2 points and my overall claim. So far I will have between those 2 points, technology offers easily consumable amounts of information combined with how the internet organizes information, right? So now I'm combining those two. What's the last part here? I will insert my initial claim with more specific wording. So combined with how the internet organizes information, it culminates in hindering our ability to truly learn about a subject, right? So that's where you kind of see my initial claim. It results in hindering our ability to learn. You know my stance. You know that I'm saying it hinders us. It doesn't forward us, or it doesn't help us learn. It hinders, right? And these are the 3 parts that are broken down, right? The red, green, and blue. So now I have my quotes for the red, right? We got that one from the Nicholas Carr reading. Then I have my quotes for the green. That's the one we got from Clive Thompson. So now I just need my quote for this blue portion, right? And this is where we have to find a new source. So I went and scoured the internet in search of a reputable source that tied back to my claim, my specific claim, right? Not just my overall idea, not just technology in general and how technology affects learning or whatever. No, I found a source that specifically relates to this blue portion. It culminates in hindering our ability to truly learn about a subject. Again, I have a video now on how to find a reputable source, so check that out to make sure that your source that you find is legit and that it's okay to use. But once I found that, I found it from the New York Times, from this article called "Our Brains Are No Match for Our Technology" by Tristan Harris. And at some point, he kind of explains, right, I'm just going to read it. He says, "Our addiction to social validation and bursts of likes would continue to destroy our attention spans. Our brains would still be drawn to outrage and angry tweets, but replacing democratic debate with childlike he said, she said. Teenagers would remain vulnerable to online social pressure and cyberbullying, harming their mental health." Here he's talking about even if we got rid of the privacy issue in particular, right? So he says, let's imagine that we solve the privacy issue, which we all know is a thing, right? Like Facebook, Google knows like everything about us, right? He's saying that even if we solved those issues, like just the social interactions that we have with technology would still result in all these certain like sorts of problems. And then he continues. He says, By influencing 2 billion brains in these ways, today's social media holds the pen of world history. The forces it has unleashed will affect future elections and even our ability to tell fact from fiction, increasing the divisions within society. Right? And so when I read that, I was like, okay, here we go. Because I can summarize these last 2 paragraphs. This one where he talks about social validation. This one he's talking about how content algorithms, and that actually relates back to the other reading, right? How algorithms and advertising store information differently and how they hide information from us, right? So it's tying in these ideas. And then this quote in particular, specifically where he talks about even our ability to tell fact from fiction, is what's really important, right? Because that's where we go back to my my thesis, right? So this quote deals with the idea that it is hard to tell what is real or fake on the internet. I could then ask in my paper, right? I would ask, if we don't know what's real or fake, then how do people know what they are, quote, learning is in fact true, i.e. learning from Facebook? How do people know what they're learning, right, in quotes, from Facebook is true? The shorter answer is, right, is that they can't. If people are able to be easily tricked from the lies that technology spouts, then technology is hindering our ability to learn because we, quote unquote, learn false information, right? So it's not really learning, it's absorbing. It's, just regurgitating stuff that we see, but it isn't actually true. And if it's not based on like an objective truth, then it's not useful. At least that's a stance I would take. I guess some people could argue that you do learn even if it's false, but I don't think many people would take that stance. And so to recap, right, we have our first bit here. Technology offers easily consumable amounts of information. And that would probably just be my topic sentence or something similar to it. And I would use this quote from Carr to substantiate that. The one about zipping along the surface like a guy on a jet ski. Then we have combined with how the internet organizes information, right? So combining how the internet organizes information with that it only offers easily consumable amounts of information. And this, I would lead into it, right, in my second paragraph, or I guess third paragraph, the second body paragraph. I would talk about what we just kind of went over in the first one, and then I would say, now that idea combined with how the internet organizes this information, and then I would discuss how the internet organizes this information, right? Then in my third body paragraph, I would talk about how both of these things combined culminate in hindering our ability to truly learn about a topic. And that's when I would pull in my outside source, and I would discuss that specific disconnection, or like just that fact that it is hard to tell fact from fiction, right? When it comes to the internet, and how that affects how we learn, and how that hinders how we learn. So hopefully this like kind of helped you in just getting an overall idea of how one person might go about coming up with a thesis and just a general outline for the paper. You obviously, like, again, I've talked about this before, but writing is very personal and everybody writes differently. Some people don't write their thesis until like they're basically done with the paper. Maybe you write all of your body paragraphs first and you don't have the specific wording that you want for the thesis, but then you come up with it later. But I do find that coming up with your intro and thesis first helps kind of set the general tone, and give you a clear outline of how to then go about the rest of the paper. Because now that I have this is like 80% of my paper done, right? Then it's just finding the wording and kind of filling everything and then writing a conclusion and bibliography, right? So this is like all the hard parts out of the way, I would say. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. My email is, in the tab on Blackboard. And good luck. This paper is interesting, right? Because even as I discuss this, right, on a YouTube video in over the internet, right? Like, I hope you're learning from this, but it is interesting how meta this conversation kind of is. Anyways, yes, like I said, email me if you have questions, and good luck, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.